In an astonishing twist, former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, long believed to be living in quiet exile, has left behind more questions than answers. As his body lies unburied in South Africa, shocking documents have emerged. A Zimbabwean passport, allegedly in his name, has surfaced, casting a dark shadow over his final days. Was Lungu preparing to renounce his homeland? Or was this a desperate attempt to escape justice? And now, his burial has been halted. Zambia demands answers. South Africa demands clarity. And a nation mourns under a cloud of suspicion. This is not just about death. This is about identity, justice, and betrayal. Former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is dead, but his burial, a process that should bring dignity and closure, has become a political earthquake. New revelations suggest that Lungu may have died holding not just a Zambian identity, but also a Zimbabwean passport. This shocking detail has prompted immediate calls for investigation, ignited diplomatic tension between Lusaka and Pretoria, and reignited old accusations about his exile, wealth, and political intentions. What does this mean for Zambia? Why was a Zimbabwean document in his possession? And what are the implications for the mourning family and a divided nation? The story of Edgar Lungu's death and its aftermath is a poignant illustration of how personal rivalries, political legacies, and national identity can collide, even in the face of mortality. Edgar Lungu, Zambia's president from 2015 to 2021, passed away on June 5, 2025, at the age of 68 in a South African hospital, sparking a cascade of controversies that transcended borders and exposed deep-seated tensions in Zambian politics. His death, far from uniting the nation in mourning, became a battleground for competing narratives about his legacy, his family's intentions, and the role of the state in honoring a former leader. The saga involves allegations of forged passports, a legal tug-of-war over his burial, and a bitter feud with his successor, President Hakainde Hichilema HH. These events have not only stirred national debate in Zambia, but also drawn attention from neighboring countries, particularly Zimbabwe and South Africa, highlighting the intricate interplay of power, identity, and justice in African politics. This narrative unfolds against the backdrop of Zambia's complex political history, where Lungu and Hichilema's rivalry, marked by electoral battles, legal confrontations, and personal animosities, has shaped public discourse. The headings you've provided suggest a multifaceted story: Lungu's death in exile, rumors about his use of a Zimbabwean passport, a legal storm involving South African courts, his widow Esther Lungu's public statements, Hichilema's response to the ensuing scandal, the delay in Lungu's burial, and the broader national and regional reactions. Each element reveals layers of conflict, from personal wishes to state protocols, and raises questions about accountability, national pride, and the legacy of a polarizing figure. Below, I'll unpack each heading to provide a clear, detailed understanding of the events and their implications. The death of a former president in exile. Edgar Lungu passed away in South Africa under highly private and controversial circumstances. Sources claim he had been receiving medical treatment in a private Johannesburg facility, far from the reach of Zambian courts and political scrutiny. But even in death, controversy followed. Lungu's family refused to hand over his body to Zambian authorities. Rumors began swirling. Was he hiding from legal persecution? Was he betrayed by his inner circle? Or was something much larger at play? Edgar Lungu's death on June 5, 2025, at Mediclinic Med Forum in Pretoria, South Africa, marked the end of a tumultuous political career and the beginning of an equally contentious posthumous saga. Lungu, who led Zambia for 6 years, had been receiving specialized medical treatment for an undisclosed illness in South Africa, a fact announced by his daughter, Tassila Lungu, in a somber video shared on Facebook. The choice of South Africa for treatment was not unusual for African leaders, who often seek advanced medical care abroad due to limited facilities at home. However, Lungu's decision to seek treatment under what some allege was a false identity, using a Zimbabwean diplomatic passport, cast a shadow over his final days and fueled speculation about his motives. BBC.com. The term exile in this context is both literal and symbolic. While Lungu was not officially exiled, his presence in South Africa, coupled with allegations of using a foreign passport, suggested a desire for privacy or protection from scrutiny in Zambia. His time in office was marked by economic struggles, high unemployment, and corruption scandals involving his allies and family, which eroded his popularity by the time he lost the 2021 election to Hichilema by nearly 1 million votes. After his defeat, Lungu briefly stepped back from politics, but returned in 2023, only to be barred by Zambia's constitutional court from running again due to term limits. His continued criticism of Hichilema's government, coupled with accusations of police harassment and restrictions on his movement, painted a picture of a man at odds with the state he once led. BBC.com. Lungu's death in a foreign hospital, far from the Zambian public he once served, underscored a sense of detachment. His daughter's invocation of "One Zambia, One Nation" in her announcement was a call for unity, yet it hinted at underlying tensions, as the government's delayed response to his death suggested a lack of coordination or willingness to honor him immediately. The absence of an official statement from Hichilema for 3 hours after Tassila's announcement, and the silence of the national broadcaster ZNBC, deepened suspicions among Lungu's supporters that the government was not eager to mourn him. This set the stage for the controversies that followed, as Lungu's death became not just a moment of grief, but a catalyst for political and legal battles. BBC CombC.com. The Zimbabwean passport revelation. Then came the game changer. According to insiders close to South African authorities, Edgar Lungu was in possession of a Zimbabwean passport, allegedly issued under a false name but bearing unmistakable biometric data. How did a former Zambian president obtain such a document? Was he granted citizenship by Zimbabwe? Was this part of a wider plan to escape Zambian prosecution? South African border agents immediately flagged the document, and with it raised red flags at the highest diplomatic levels. One of the most shocking developments in the aftermath of Lungu's death was the claim that he had been using a Zimbabwean diplomatic passport under the name Tendai Munyaradzi. This allegation, reported by the Zambian Observer and amplified by activists like the Progressive Forces of South Africa, sparked a diplomatic firestorm and raised questions about Lungu's identity and intentions. According to court papers cited in media reports, no Zambian died at the Pretoria hospital on June 5. Instead, a Zimbabwean named Tendai Munyaradzi was recorded, fueling speculation that Lungu had used a false identity to conceal his presence in South Africa. The revelation prompted outrage and confusion. How could a former head of state, a public figure of Lungu's stature, acquire and use a foreign diplomatic passport? Critics, including Zimbabwean social media users, expressed frustration at their government's delayed response to the allegations, with some accusing officials of negligence or complicity. Zimbabwe's government, through spokesperson Nick Mangwana, eventually denied the claims, but the slow reaction allowed the rumor to gain traction, damaging Zimbabwe's reputation. Commentators like Jeff Judah question how a high-profile figure could obtain such a document without government assistance, calling it a national security issue for Zimbabwe. Compalaweo24.com. The passport controversy also raised legal and ethical questions. If Lungu was indeed using a Zimbabwean passport, it could imply an attempt to evade scrutiny, possibly related to the corruption charges faced by his family in Zambia. Esther Lungu and their children have been accused of stealing cars and other financial improprieties, charges they deny. Some speculated that Lungu sought to protect his family's wealth or avoid extradition by operating under a false identity. However, without concrete evidence, these remain allegations, and the hospital's acceptance of a foreign passport for a former president suggests possible administrative oversights rather than a grand conspiracy. The Guardian, Guardian.com, ZambianObserver.com. The Zimbabwean passport issue complicated the burial arrangements as it introduced doubts about Lungu's legal status at the time of his death. It also strained Zambia-Zimbabwe relations, with critics arguing that Zimbabwe's government owed an explanation for issuing such a document. For Zambians, the revelation was a blow to national pride, as it suggested that their former leader might have sought to obscure his identity, undermining the dignity associated with his office. The controversy fed into the broader narrative of Lungu's legacy as a polarizing figure whose actions, real or alleged, continued to provoke debate even after his death. Bulawayo24.com. Legal storm in Zambia and South Africa. Zambian officials, shocked and embarrassed, have called for a full investigation. President Hakainde Hichilema's administration has requested that the body be returned to Zambia for official state burial, but with conditions. Legal experts argue that if Lungu indeed possessed dual or fraudulent citizenship, he may have violated national laws, even posthumously. Meanwhile, the South African Home Affairs Department has reportedly blocked the funeral until documentation can be verified. This burial standoff has drawn global media attention. The dispute over Lungu's burial escalated into a legal battle that crossed national boundaries, involving South African courts and pitting the Zambian government against Lungu's family and his political party, the Patriotic Front (PF). The Zambian government, led by Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, sought to repatriate Lungu's body for a state funeral in Zambia, arguing that, as a former president, his burial was a matter of national interest governed by state protocols. On June 25, 2025, just as a private burial organized by Lungu's family was about to take place at the Cathedral of Christ the King in Johannesburg, the Pretoria High Court issued an injunction to halt the proceedings, following an urgent application by the Zambian government. Lusaka Times, ComPS.orgAPnews.com. The court's ruling came after a mass had been held, leaving mourners, including Lungu's widow Esther and their children, in a state of confusion and distress. The judge ordered a full hearing for August 4th, giving the Zambian government until July 4th to submit amended papers, and the Lungu family until July 11th to respond. The government's argument rested on Zambian law, which designates the burial of former presidents as a state affair, with a specific site, Embassy Park in Lusaka, set aside for such purposes. Kabesha emphasized that personal wishes, even those allegedly expressed by Lungu, must yield to national interest. TheGuardian.com.bc, UKBBC.com. Lungu's family, however, insisted on a private ceremony in South Africa, citing his explicit instructions that Hichilema should not be involved in his funeral. Their lawyer, Makibi Zulu, argued that the government was disregarding the family's rights and Lungu's wishes, treating the former president's body as state property. The PF supported the family, accusing the government of politicizing a solemn occasion and using Lungu's death for political gain. The standoff led to the cancellation of 2 planned state funerals in Zambia as disagreements over arrangements persisted. BBC, CombC.com. This legal storm highlighted highlighted broader issues of state authority versus individual rights. Across Africa, similar disputes have arisen, such as the burial of Ghanaian presidents or Angola's José Eduardo dos Santos, where state protocols often override family preferences. In Zambia, the precedent set by the burial of Kenneth Kaunda at Embassy Park reinforced the government's position. However, the involvement of a South African court introduced an international dimension, raising questions about sovereignty and the rights of foreign nationals. The court's decision to delay the burial underscored the complexity of balancing legal traditions with personal and political considerations, leaving Lungu's body in limbo and mourners uncertain about how to honor him. BBC, combc.comapnews.com. Family speaks out. Esther Lungu's silence breaks. Former First Lady Esther Lungu initially remained silent, but as pressure mounted, she responded emotionally in a brief statement. "My husband had his reasons. He feared for his life. We don't owe explanations to a nation that turned its back on him." Her words ignited a firestorm. Zambians on social media are divided, some blaming the government for pushing Lungu into exile, others accusing the family of treason and betrayal. Esther Lungu, the former First Lady, emerged as a central figure in the burial dispute, breaking her silence to defend her family's position and assert their right to control Edgar Lungu's funeral arrangements. Her public statements, often relayed through family spokesperson Makibi Zulu, emphasized the family's desire to honor Lungu's wishes for a private ceremony in South Africa, free from Hichilema's involvement. Esther, visibly emotional at the Johannesburg Cathedral where the burial was halted, became a symbol of the family's resistance to what they perceived as government overreach. BBC, combc.guardian.com. Esther's role was complicated by her own legal troubles in Zambia, where she faced charges of stealing cars, which she has denied. These accusations, along with broader allegations of corruption against the Lungu family, fueled speculation that the family's insistence on a South African burial was a strategy to remain in self-imposed exile and avoid accountability. A Zambian Observer article claimed that Esther's affidavit revealed the family's plan to seek political asylum in South Africa, using Lungu's grave as a pretext to stay abroad. This narrative painted the family as manipulating a national tragedy to shield their wealth, allegedly accumulated through illicit means during Lungu's presidency. TheGuardian.com. Zambian Observer, ZambianObserver.com. However, Esther's public stance was framed as a defense of her husband's dignity and legacy. She and her children, including Tassila and Dalitso, argued that Lungu's explicit instruction to keep Hichilema away from his funeral reflected a deep personal and political rift. The family's decision to hold a private memorial at Pretoria's Sacred Heart Cathedral, attended by PF members, underscored their determination to control the narrative around Lungu's death. Esther's silence breaking was less about engaging in public debate and more about asserting her family's autonomy in a moment of grief, even as it drew criticism from those who saw it as defiance of national protocols. BBC, combc.com. The political fallout. HH responds. President Hichilema finally addressed the controversy, urging calm and stating, "This is not the time for secrets. We must respect our institutions and ensure that the truth is preserved." However, critics claim HH's government is quietly celebrating the delay, seeing it as a symbolic win against their former rival. The Patriotic Front Party, Lungu's political base, has demanded an apology and accused the UPND regime of weaponizing the moment for political gain. President Hakainde Hichilema, or HH as he is commonly known, found himself at the center of the controversy, navigating a delicate balance between honoring a former president and managing a politically charged situation. Hichilema's response to Lungu's death was initially restrained, with a 3-hour delay in issuing a condolence message, which he posted on Facebook, calling for peace, dignity, and togetherness. This delay, coupled with the national broadcaster's silence, was perceived by Lungu supporters as a sign of disrespect or reluctance to acknowledge his legacy. BBC.com. Hichilema's government argued that Lungu, as a former president, deserved a state funeral in Zambia, emphasizing national interest over personal wishes. He expressed a commitment to unity, urging Zambians to come together above political affiliation to honor Lungu. However, his insistence on a state funeral, despite Lungu's alleged wish to exclude him, was seen by the PF and Lungu's family as an attempt to assert control rather than respect the deceased's intentions. Hichilema's decision to pursue legal action in South Africa to block the private burial further escalated tensions, with critics accusing him of politicizing the issue. BBC.com. Lusaka Times. combc.com. The passport scandal added another layer of complexity. Hichilema's government faced pressure to clarify the allegations of Lungu's Zimbabwean passport, which raised questions about national security and diplomatic relations with Zimbabwe. Hichilema's restrained public statements avoided direct engagement with the passport issue, focusing instead on the burial dispute and the need for a dignified state funeral. His supporters argued that he was acting in the national interest, while detractors, including PF acting President Given Lubinda, accused him of turning a solemn occasion into a political game. Hichilema's response, while measured, struggled to bridge the divide between his administration and Lungu's loyalists, highlighting the enduring rift between the two leaders. Bulawayo 24, ComPS or BBC.com. Burial delayed, nation in suspense. As of today, Edgar Lungu's body remains in a South African mortuary. Negotiations between governments are ongoing. The burial, once seen as a moment of national unity, identity is now tangled in red tape, suspicion, and greed. Can Zambia move forward without knowing the full truth? Or will this final chapter of Lungu's life haunt the country for years to come? The delay in Lungu's burial, caused by the South African court's injunction, left Zambia in a state of mourning limbo, with national reactions ranging from grief to outrage. The government declared a 16-day national mourning period, during which entertainment like football matches and concerts was halted, reflecting Zambia's Christian traditions of solemn mourning. However, confusion arose over competing mourning venues, with the government directing mourners to a state lodge and the PF urging them to its headquarters, each with separate condolence books. This division deepened public frustration as Zambians were left uncertain about how to honor their former president, BBC CombC.com. Public reactions were polarized. Lungu supporters, particularly within the PF, viewed the government's actions as disrespectful, accusing Hichilema of using the burial dispute to undermine Lungu's legacy. Civil society groups and religious leaders, such as Emmanuel Chikoya of the Council of Churches in Zambia, called for dialogue to resolve the standoff, emphasizing the need to preserve national dignity. Others, including activists in South Africa, argued that Lungu's body should be repatriated to Zambia, questioning why a former president would be buried abroad under a foreign flag. BBC CombC.com.za. The passport allegations further inflamed sentiments, with some Zambians questioning Lungu's patriotism and others defending his right to privacy. Social media platforms buzzed with debates, with Zimbabweans expressing embarrassment over the passport issue and Zambians grappling with the humiliation of a former leader's alleged use of a false identity. The delay, coupled with the legal battle, prolonged the nation's grief and amplified divisions, as Lungu's death became a mirror for Zambia's political fault lines. Lusaka Times, Komi Harare, Kambulawayo24.com. Conclusion. Legacy in question. Edgar Lungu's legacy has always been polarizing. To some, he was a protector of sovereignty. To others, a symbol of corruption and fear. But now, as a passport controversy clouds his death, even his identity is under dispute. One thing is clear: in death, as in life, Edgar Lungu remains a man of mystery, a figure too large to be buried without a fight. Zambia must now choose truth or silence, dignity or division. Edgar Lungu's legacy is a study in contrasts, shaped by his achievements, controversies, and the enduring feud with Hichilema. As president, he encouraged Chinese investment and infrastructure development, but his tenure was marred by economic struggles, high unemployment, and corruption scandals. His youth wing was accused of harassing opposition supporters, and his family faced ongoing legal battles over alleged ill-gotten wealth. Despite these challenges, Lungu remained a significant figure in Zambian politics, retaining influence within the PF even after his 2021 defeat. BBC CombC.com. ZambianObserver.com. His death in exile and the subsequent controversies, particularly the passport allegations and burial dispute, cast a shadow over his legacy. For supporters, Lungu was a champion of Zambian sovereignty who faced persecution from Hichilema's government. For critics, his alleged use of a Zimbabwean passport and the family's resistance to a state funeral symbolized a lack of accountability. The legal battle in South Africa and the public's divided reactions underscored the complexity of his legacy, which remains entangled in questions of integrity, nationalism, and justice. Zambian Observer, Kambulawayo24.com. Lungu's story reflects broader themes in African politics: the tension between state authority and individual rights, the legacy of corruption, and the challenges of national unity in the face of political rivalry. His death, rather than providing closure, has opened new debates about leadership, accountability, and the role of the state in shaping a leader's final resting place. As Zambia awaits the resolution of the burial dispute, Lungu's legacy lingers in the shadows, a reminder of the enduring power of personal and political divides.